Part 1. In a quiet neighborhood just outside Columbus, Ohio, Dale Mitchell sat on his porch watching the sun dip behind the trees. The air smelled like cut grass and distant rain. He sipped his coffee, the steam long gone, and listened to the hum of the evening news playing softly from the living room TV. At 62, Dale had seen his share of world events, wars, pandemics, even the first manned mission to Mars. But nothing had unsettled him quite like the reports coming in over the last few weeks. Entire human colonies were vanishing, not damaged. Not attacked in the usual sense, just gone. No signals, no wreckage, no survivors. Proxima B, once a thriving outpost with over 30,000 people, had gone dark 3 weeks ago. Then Gliese 667c, then a smaller research station near Barnard's Star. Each time the United Earth Council issued the same calm statement. Investigations are ongoing. There is no evidence of hostile action. Dale knew better. He'd spent 30 years designing deep space comms arrays for NASA before retiring. He understood signal decay, solar interference, even alien jamming. But this silence was too clean, too perfect. It felt deliberate. Inside the house, the news anchor's voice grew urgent. Despite growing public concern, Ambassador Liu reaffirmed today that Earth remains committed to peaceful dialogue with the Cathari Alliance. When pressed about the missing colonies, she stated that jumping to conclusions risks destabilizing the fragile peace we've built over the last decade. Dale set his mug down. Peaceful dialogue. That phrase made his jaw tighten. The Cathari had arrived 50 years ago. Tall, silver-eyed beings with smooth, chitinous skin and a reputation for order. They controlled half the known systems and spoke often of cosmic harmony. But Dale had read the unclassified briefings. Their idea of harmony usually involved absorbing weaker species into their collective, or, if resistance was too strong, removing them entirely. He walked back inside and turned up the volume. On screen, a shaky handheld video showed a freighter captain describing how he'd passed through the Proxima B sector and found nothing, not even a single derelict pod. "It's like they were erased," the man said, voice trembling. Like someone hit a delete button. Dale switched off the TV. Silence filled the room. He walked to his garage where old schematics and prototype parts still lined the walls. In the corner sat a half-finished project, a compact quantum relay he'd been tinkering with for fun. Now it felt like something more. Meanwhile, on the red plains of Mars, Corporal Tony Garza wiped sweat from his brow as he adjusted the mag boots on a new recruit. The training dome outside New Ares base was sweltering. Even with the climate controls running, Tony had been a Marine for 8 years. But lately his mind wasn't on drills. His younger sister, Maria, lived on Proxima B. She'd sent him a birthday message just 2 weeks before the colony went silent. He'd played it 100 times since. "Focus, Garza," he muttered to himself, snapping back to the exercise. But during a break, he slipped into a secure terminal in the barracks and pulled up restricted fleet logs. Most were redacted, but one file, marked Sensor Anomaly Kuiper Edge, caught his eye. Grainy footage showed 3 Cathari destroyers forming a triangle around a human freighter. Seconds later, the freighter vanished in a flash of violet light. No explosion, no debris, just empty space. Tony's hands clenched. He knew that light. It matched descriptions from old Cathari cleansing rituals mentioned in fringe xenology papers. He tried to report it, but his chain of command told him to stand down and await official guidance. Guidance that never came. Back on Earth, President Elena Cruz stood in the war room beneath Geneva's Peace Spire. Holographic maps floated in the air, showing human colonies blinking out one by one. Her advisors argued in hushed tones. "We can't accuse the Cathari without proof," said the we're Secretary of Interstellar Affairs. 12. "Colonies gone in 6 weeks isn't coincidence," countered General Owens, head of Earth Defense, "and if we provoke them," the Secretary shot back, "they control the helium-3 lanes. Half our fusion reactors shut down and we're back to fossil fuels within a year." Cruz rubbed her temples. She believed the Cathari were responsible, but declaring war without undeniable evidence could fracture the global alliance. Worse, it might give the Cathari the excuse they needed to strike openly. So she chose caution. "We continue diplomatic outreach," she announced, "and increase surveillance, quietly." The decision was broadcast worldwide that evening. Dale watched it from his kitchen table, a wrench in one hand, his relay prototype in the other. When Cruz said patience and prudence must guide us, he let out a bitter laugh. Patience. Prudence. While people disappeared, he thought of Maria Garza, whose face he'd seen in a news clip weeks ago, smiling, holding up a homegrown tomato from Proxima B's hydroponic farms. Gone now, erased. In Houston, Lisa Tran scrolled through astrophysics forums late into the night. A quiet woman in her early 40s, she taught stellar dynamics at Rice University but spent her free time analyzing deep space emissions. Something about the energy signatures near the vanished colonies didn't add up. They matched no known natural phenomenon. But they did match patterns, described in ancient Cathari religious texts she'd stumbled upon in a declassified archive. Texts that spoke of purifying the unworthy and cleansing the stars of chaotic life. She compiled her findings into a report and sent it to 3 contacts she trusted, one of them Dale Mitchell, whose work on quantum entanglement she'd admired for years. Dale read her email at 3 a.m. His eyes widened. This wasn't just theory. It was a motive. A plan, he typed back, and meet me in person. Bring everything. As dawn broke over Ohio, Dale packed a small bag. He wasn't sure what he'd do next, but he knew one thing for certain. Waiting for permission to protect your own kind was a luxury humanity could no longer afford. And somewhere in the void between stars, Cathari warships turned their bows toward the inner systems, their commanders unaware that the species they'd dismissed as soft and divided was already waking up. The silence wouldn't last much longer. 21 weeks passed and the silence shattered. This time the attack came close, too close. Titan Mining Station Gamma, a sprawling complex orbiting Saturn's largest moon, vanished in a single night. Over 12,000 people worked there. Engineers, miners, families who'd built lives in the rings of ice and metal. One moment, the station broadcast routine maintenance logs. The next, static. Then came the footage. A private survey drone launched by a Belter cargo hauler captured it by accident. 3 Cathari cruisers surrounded the station. Without warning, they opened fire. Not with missiles or lasers, but with something worse. Beams of violet energy sliced through the hulls, melting steel like wax. Escape pods launched in panic, but the Cathari targeted them one by one, reducing each to glowing dust before they could reach safety. The video leaked within hours. It spread across every network, every screen, every public square on Earth and its colonies. People watched in horror as pods carrying children, medics, unarmed civilians were erased from existence. No warning. No mercy. Riots broke out in Geneva. Crowds surrounded the United Earth Council headquarters shouting for action. In Tokyo, students marched through the streets holding photos of missing relatives. In Nairobi, a group of veterans stormed a recruitment center demanding to be sent to the front lines. Even though no official front existed yet, President Elena Cruz called an emergency session. This time, even her most cautious advisors fell silent. The evidence was undeniable. The Cathari weren't just hostile. They were exterminating humans. Still, the council moved slowly. They authorized defensive posturing and limited reconnaissance, but refused to declare war. We must avoid escalation, the Secretary of Interstellar Affairs insisted, though his voice lacked its usual confidence. Tony Garza, now stationed at Earth Defense Command in Colorado, watched the council's announcement with disgust. He'd submitted his sensor logs weeks ago. Nothing had been done. Now 12,000 more were dead. Among them was his old friend Carlos, who'd transferred to Titan Station just months before. That night, Tony bypassed protocol. Using an old backdoor from his Black Ops training, he accessed deep-range patrol data. He found something the Council hadn't shared. Cathari ships were massing near the Kuiper Belt, just beyond Pluto's orbit. Their formation matched invasion patterns used in historical Cathari conquests. He knew what was coming next. Earth. Without waiting for orders, Tony assembled a small team, 2 pilots, a comm specialist, and a weapons tech. They stole a stealth scout ship from the hangar, wiped its logs, and jumped toward the outer system. Their mission: get proof the Council couldn't ignore. Meanwhile, in Houston, Lisa Tran received Dale's message. She met him at a roadside diner outside the city, rain tapping softly on the windows. Over coffee and pie, she showed him her research. Charts, translated texts, energy signatures that matched the violet beams from the Titan footage. They believe chaos is a disease, she said quietly. And humans are the infection, Dale nodded. He'd suspected as much. They don't see us as enemies. They see us as waste to be cleaned up. Back in his garage, they began planning. Not a protest. Not a petition. Something real. Dale still had contacts. Former engineers, shipyard workers, retired Marines who'd grown tired of red tape. Lisa knew scientists who'd been sidelined for speaking out. Together, they reached out through encrypted channels using old ham radio codes and dead drop servers. Within days, a network formed. Not an army, not yet, but a spark. In Columbus, a retired welder offered his workshop to retrofit cargo drones with armor plating. In Seattle, a group of software hackers began building jamming protocols based on Cathari signal patterns. In Buenos Aires, a former freighter captain volunteered his ship, the Iron Will, for civilian defense exercises. Dale called it Project Wake Up. Tony's team reached the Kuiper Belt after a tense 7-day jump. Cloaked and silent, they drifted near a frozen dwarf planet watching. Sure enough, a Cathari command ship loomed in the distance, surrounded by escorts. Tony's tech intercepted a burst transmission. It was encrypted, but fragments decoded. Phase 3 initiated. Nest world targeted. Cleanse before bloom. Nest world. Earth. Tony's blood ran cold. He recorded everything. The ship IDs, the coordinates, the message fragments, and sent it on a tight beam burst to every military and civilian receiver he could reach. Then, knowing they'd been spotted, he ordered full retreat. They barely made it. A Cathari patrol fired on them as they jumped to warp. The scout ship's rear shields failed and they lost their comms array, but they escaped. Back on Earth, the data flooded in. This time, even the Council couldn't ignore it. President Cruz addressed the world that evening, her face grim. We have confirmed hostile intent from the Cathari Alliance. Effective immediately. All human systems are on high alert. Defensive fleets are mobilizing. But it was too little, too late for many. Dale watched the speech from his garage, tools scattered across the workbench. Beside him, Lisa stared at a screen showing live feeds from Lunar City Alpha. Already, Cathari ships were appearing on the edge of lunar orbit. They're not waiting, she whispered. Dale picked up a wrench. Then neither are we. He activated the network. Messages went out to every contact, every volunteer, every hidden workshop. Phase 1 begins now. In Houston, engineers began loading railgun coils onto cargo haulers. In Mars, retired Marines dusted off old armor suits. In the asteroid belt, miners armed their drills with plasma cutters and called them weapons. They weren't soldiers. They were teachers, farmers, mechanics, students, but they were done waiting for permission to defend their homes. As the first Cathari dropships broke atmosphere over the moon, a different kind of fleet began to gather in Earth's shadow. Not sleek warships, but patched together freighters, tugs, and survey vessels, each one loaded with whatever weapons their crews could build. Dale climbed aboard the Iron Will, his left sleeve pinned where his arm would have been. He'd lost it testing a prototype reactor the week before, but he didn't care. He stood on the bridge looking at the faces around him, scared, angry, determined. Lisa joined him, holding a data pad with final targeting coordinates. Tony, patched up and promoted overnight to field commander, gave a nod from the comm station. No one spoke. They didn't need to. The message was clear. No more playing Civilized. On Part 3, the Cathari came at Lunar City Alpha like a storm. Their ships moved in perfect formation, silent and precise, cutting through Earth's orbital defenses with cold efficiency. Within hours, the moon's surface glowed with fire. Evacuation shuttles lifted off in chaos. Many shot down before they cleared the atmosphere. Those who made it to orbit found little safety. The official Earth fleet was outnumbered, outgunned, and falling back. But then, something unexpected happened. From the dark side of the moon, from hidden asteroid docks, from cargo lanes long ignored by the military, a new force emerged. It wasn't polished or uniform. Some ships were rusted freighters with railgun barrels welded to their hulls. Others were mining tugs fitted with plasma torches and shield boosters cobbled together from scrap. At their center flew the Iron Will, its hull patched with titanium plates and its comms blaring a single message on all open channels. This is human space. Turn back or burn. Dale stood on the bridge, his remaining hand gripping the edge of the console. Beside him, Lisa monitored enemy movements, her eyes sharp behind tired lids. Tony coordinated strike teams from the tactical station, his voice calm despite the chaos outside. The Cathari didn't respond. They never did. To them, humans were noise, temporary, insignificant. They fired. What followed wasn't a traditional battle. It was a swarm. The civilian fleet broke into small groups. darting between Cathari lines like gnats around a bear. They didn't try to win with firepower. They won with chaos. A belter tug rammed a Cathari sensor array, blinding a destroyer for precious seconds. A schoolteacher-turned-pilot launched drone decoys that mimicked military signatures, drawing fire away from real ships. In the confusion, Tony led a strike team in a stolen Cathari shuttle straight into the hangar bay of a command cruiser. Inside, they moved fast. Cathari warriors were tall and strong but slow to adapt. Tony's team used the ship's own maintenance tunnels, planting fusion charges at key junctions, reactor couplings, bridge supports, life support cores. They lost 2 people in the process, but they got the job done. As they escaped in an emergency pod, the command ship erupted from within, its violet armor cracking like eggshell under the pressure of its own failing systems. Back on the Iron Will, Lisa hacked into the dying ship's data core during its final moments. She found logs, thousands of them, detailing every human colony destroyed, every life erased, every cleansing carried out in the name of Cathari purity. She didn't just save the files. She broadcast them. Every channel, every network, every public screen on Earth. Mars, the Belt. The Cathari had tried to hide their genocide behind silence. Now the truth screamed across the stars. On Earth, people watched in stunned horror as footage played of children's toys floating in the wreckage of Proxima B, of last messages from doomed colonists, of Cathari commanders calmly ordering the destruction of unarmed ships. The United Earth Council could no longer pretend. President Cruz stood before the Global Assembly, her voice shaking not with fear but with fury. "We offered peace," she said. "They answered with fire. Now we answer with truth." Those words became a rallying cry. Factories that once built luxury yachts began forging armor plates. Schools turned into training grounds. Even children helped by assembling drone parts or coding jamming software. The war was no longer just the military's fight. It belonged to everyone. The official Earth fleet, shamed and stirred by the civilian resistance, regrouped. They joined the Ragged Armada, not as commanders but as allies. Admirals took orders from freighter captains who knew the asteroid fields better than any textbook. Marines trained alongside miners who'd spent years navigating zero-G tunnels. Together, they pushed the Cathari back from lunar orbit, not with overwhelming force but with relentless, unpredictable pressure. The Cathari, used to orderly conquests, struggled against an enemy that refused to follow rules. Dale's fleet didn't just fight. They protected. When a medical station near Europa came under attack, 3 civilian ships formed a shield around it, taking hits so the evac shuttles could escape. When a Cathari jammer disabled Mars comms, a group of hackers and a recycled satellite restored the signal using old radio frequencies. The Cathari didn't even monitor. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't clean. But it worked. By the end of the week, the Cathari had withdrawn from the Sol system. Their losses were light by their standards, but their confidence was shattered. For the first time, they faced a species that didn't beg for mercy, that didn't wait to be saved, that fought back with everything it had, even if all it had was a wrench and a will to survive. Dale stood on the observation deck of the Iron Will, watching the last Cathari ship vanish into warp. His left sleeve hung empty, his face lined with exhaustion, but his eyes were clear. Lisa joined him, holding a cup of terrible ship coffee. "They'll be back," she said. "Maybe," Dale replied. "But next time they'll know we're ready." Tony walked up behind them, his uniform torn, a fresh scar on his cheek. "The council just sent a message. They want us to stand down. Say the crisis is over." Dale didn't look at him. "Is it?" Tony shook his head. "Not even close." Silence settled between them, not heavy but steady. They knew what came next. Rebuilding, rearming, preparing. Not for revenge, but for survival, because the universe wasn't kind. It never had been. And humanity had finally learned that playing civilized in a world of predators only made you prey. Now they chose to be something else. Something that watched. Something that remembered. Something that would never again let silence cover murder. And as the stars blinked cold and distant above them, the Iron Will turned its bow toward the outer rim, not to flee but to guard. The war wasn't over. But the fear was. Part 4 in victory came with a heavy cost. Lunar City Alpha lay in ruins, its domes cracked, its streets littered with debris and ash. Over 200,000 people had lived there. Fewer than half made it out. Among the missing was Jenny Morales, a field medic who stayed behind to help children board the last evacuation shuttle. Tony had known her since basic training. They'd shared coffee in the mess hall, argued about old Earth music, promised to visit each other's families after the war. Now there was only silence where her voice used to be. Dale lost more than his arm in the battle. The Iron Will's reactor had overloaded during a close-range strike, and though the crew sealed the breach in time, Dale was caught in the blast. Doctors saved his life, but not his left arm. He woke up in a med bay on Ceres, bandaged and sore, to news that his old neighbor back in Columbus, Mrs. Ellis, who used to bring him apple pie every Thanksgiving, had died in a panic stampede during the lunar evac. She'd gone to visit her granddaughter. Lisa's brother Kevin never came home. He'd been stationed on a defense satellite near Neptune, monitoring Cathari movements. When the enemy fleet jumped in, his station was the first target. His last transmission was a calm voice saying, "Tell Lisa I finished her book." The file attached was a handwritten letter and a copy of a novel he'd been writing in his spare time. Lisa read it once, then locked it away. She hadn't opened it since. Yet despite the grief, something new was growing. The Cathari had retreated, not just from Sol, but from every human-claimed system. Their alliance began to crack. Reports came in from the Vega sector. The Zenthari, once silent subjects of the Cathari, had risen up. In the Orion Arm, the Mayorkal declared independence, citing Earth's example as their inspiration. The galaxy was watching, and for the first time, humans were seen not as weak but as dangerous. Back on Earth, the governments tried to return to order. The United Earth Council demanded the civilian fleet disband. "The emergency has passed," read the official order. "All unauthorized vessels must surrender weapons and return to civilian status." Dale read the message in his temporary quarters on Ceres. He didn't reply. Instead, he called a meeting. Not with politicians, but with the people who'd fought beside him. Freighter captains, hackers, teachers turned drone pilots, miners with plasma rifles. They gathered in a repurposed cargo bay, tired but alert. "They want us to go back to being quiet," Dale said, his voice rough but steady, "to pretend this never happened. To trust that the Cathari won't come back just because they say so." Lisa stood beside him. "We know better. Silence got us killed before. It'll get us killed again." Tony, now wearing the insignia of a coalition colonel, stepped forward. "We don't need their permission to protect our own. We never did." That night, they formed the Sovereign Response Coalition, a network of human systems, ships, and citizens bound by one rule. No one speaks for humanity, but humanity itself. No council, no ambassador, no distant politician would decide when to fight or when to forgive. If a threat rose, they would answer. Together, President Cruz faced a choice. She could send the military to shut them down, or she could listen. She chose to listen. After secret talks with Dale, Lisa, and Tony, she signed the Covenant of Vigilance. It granted the coalition legal autonomy in matters of existential threat. They wouldn't replace the Earth fleet, but they would stand beside it, watching, ready, independent. It wasn't perfect. Some called them vigilantes. Others feared they'd become a new kind of empire. But most understood. After genocide, trust had to be earned, not assumed. Months passed. The coalition rebuilt. They turned old mining stations into training hubs. They converted cargo drones into early warning scouts. Lisa led a science wing that mapped Cathari remnants, tracking every signal, every whisper from the outer dark. Dale oversaw engineering, designing new ships that were fast, modular, and built for real people, not just soldiers. Tony trained crews in asymmetric warfare, teaching them how to fight smarter, not harder. On Mars, schools added new lessons, not just history, but survival. Children learned how to seal a hull breach, how to send an encrypted message, how to recognize enemy signals, not to scare them, but to prepare them. Because the lesson of the war was clear, safety wasn't given. It was defended. One evening, Dale stood on the observation deck of the new coalition base near Ceres. The Iron Will floated nearby, repaired and upgraded, its hull now marked with the names of the lost: Jenny, Kevin, Mrs. Ellis, and thousands more. Lisa joined him, holding 2 cups of rehydrated tea. "Do you think they'll come back?" she asked. "They might," Dale said. "But they'll think twice." Tony appeared behind them, his uniform crisp, his eyes older than his years. "We got a ping from the TRAPPIST-1 system. Faint, but it matches Cathari comms. Could be a scout. Could be nothing." Dale didn't hesitate. "Send a recon team. Quiet and fast." "Already done," Tony said with a small smile. They stood in silence, watching the stars. The grief was still there, deep and quiet, like a scar that never fully fades. But so was the resolve. Humanity had been tested, it had bled, and it had refused to break. The universe was still cruel, but now humans were no longer its victims. They were its witnesses, its guardians. It's awakened, and somewhere out there in the endless dark, the Cathari remembered the day the soft, chaotic species they dismissed as noise turned and fought, not with hate, but with truth. That memory would keep them away longer than any weapon ever could. 2 years had passed since the Battle of Lunar City Alpha, and the scars remained. But so did the strength. On the dwarf planet Ceres, Dale Mitchell walked slowly across the training grounds, his prosthetic arm whirring softly with each step. He no longer wore it for show. It was part of him now, just like the quiet anger that still lived in his chest and the deeper calm that had grown around it. Around him, young recruits practiced zero-G maneuvers in simulated hull breaches, their movements sharp, focused. They weren't soldiers in the old sense. They were protectors, and Dale made sure they understood the difference. He stopped near a group learning how to jury-rig a comms array from scrap. One of them, a girl no older than 19, looked up and smiled. "Mr. Mitchell, we got the signal boosted to 3 sectors. Good," Dale said. "But remember, speed means nothing if the message is wrong. Always verify before you send." She nodded, serious now. That was the lesson they all had to learn. Action without wisdom was just noise. Farther out, beyond the asteroid belt, Lisa Tran floated inside a science vessel named the Kevin R, after her brother. The ship was small but packed with sensors, mapping every ripple in space-time near former Cathari zones. They hadn't seen a single Cathari ship in over a year, but Lisa knew better than to assume they were gone for good. Silence could mean many things: fear, planning, or simply waiting. Her team had found faint energy echoes near the TRAPPIST-1 system last month, not enough to confirm a presence, but enough to keep watch. She reviewed the latest data on her screen. Nothing new, but she didn't relax. Vigilance wasn't a task, it was a habit. Meanwhile, near the edge of human-controlled space, Tony Garza stood on the bridge of his ship, the Iron Will. Its hull bore new scars, new names, and a single phrase painted in bold white letters along the side. No more playing Civilized. He wasn't just a colonel anymore. He was a symbol of the people who refused to wait for permission to defend their home. His current patrol route took him past Gliese 667C, once a thriving colony, now a memorial. A simple ring of stones floated in orbit, each engraved with a name. Tony slowed the ship as they passed. He didn't speak. He just let the silence honor them. A beep from the console broke the quiet. A civilian freighter, the Starling, hailed them. "Colonel Garza, we've got a sensor ghost near the Oort cloud. Looks like a derelict, but the energy signature. It's familiar." Tony's eyes narrowed. "Send the coordinates. I'm on my way." It turned out to be an old Cathari scout drone, disabled and drifting. Not a threat, but a warning. Someone had left it there on purpose. A message. Maybe from a splinter group. Maybe from a rival faction within the Cathari themselves. Whatever it was, it meant they were still watching. Tony ordered it towed back to Ceres for analysis. Then he sent a general alert to all coalition outposts. Stay sharp. Back on Earth, life had changed in quieter ways. Schools taught children not just math and history, but how to recognize propaganda, how to question authority, how to build something from nothing. Cities had emergency shelters built into their design, not as bunkers but as community centers that could seal in a crisis. People didn't live in fear, but they lived ready. President Cruz had stepped down after her term, replaced by a council that included not just politicians, but engineers, teachers, and even a former freighter pilot. The covenant of vigilance held strong. The Sovereign Response Coalition operated openly now, respected, not feared. They didn't seek power. They sought safety. One evening, Dale, Lisa, and Tony met in the mess hall of the Ceres base. The room was warm, filled with the smell of real coffee and recycled bread. They didn't talk about war. They talked about the new hydroponic gardens on Mars, about a student who'd built a better shield mod from old drone parts, about a song a kid on Europa had written that was spreading through the fleet. But then Lisa grew quiet. "I got a message today," she said, "from a Zenthari trader. They call us the Awakened now." Tony raised an eyebrow. "Not the violent? Not the rebels?" "No," Lisa said. They say we woke up before it was too late, that we chose to see the truth even when it hurt. Dale looked out the viewport at the stars. Maybe that's the real victory. Not that we won a fight, but that we finally understood what we were fighting for. They sat in silence for a while, not needing words. Outside, ships came and went. Freighters, scouts, patrol vessels, all flying under a banner that wasn't a flag, but a promise. Never again, in the years that followed, humanity didn't become an empire. It didn't seek to conquer. It simply refused to be erased. Other species, once wary, now reached out, not for weapons, but for alliance. They saw that humans didn't fight for glory. They fought for each other. And in the dark between stars, where the Cathari once moved with unquestioned authority, there was now hesitation. Their record spoke of a species that smiled too much, spoke too loud, built too fast, and died too easily. But those records were outdated. The new truth was this: when pushed to the edge, humans didn't break. They adapted. They remembered. They protected. Dale often thought of that first night on his porch in Columbus, watching the news with a cold cup of coffee. He'd felt helpless then. Now he knew helplessness was a choice, and humanity had chosen differently. As he walked back to his quarters that night, he passed a young recruit practicing emergency protocols. The boy fumbled with a sealant patch, frustrated. Dale stopped and showed him the trick. "Twist it, don't press it." "Thanks, sir," the boy said. "You'll need it one day," Dale replied. "Not because I hope you will, but because I refuse to let you be unready." And somewhere, far beyond the edge of known space, the stars burned cold and endless, but no longer alone. Among them flew ships with human names, human voices, and a simple, unshakable rule: we do not forget. We do not forgive genocide. And we do not play civilized when survival is on the line. The universe had tested them, they had answered, and they were still watching.